Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is peace and harmony. Why is it so difficult for me to leave this abusive relationship? I feel, and they've relayed some details in their comment, but they're finding it very difficult to leave or let go. Realize that when you're in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic or psychopathic, we're talking about eventually what's going to become an adverse experience for many people who are involved. If you get very close to someone who has a pathological sense of self-importance and coupled with a lack of empathy, which means you don't sort of register on any sort of Richter scale with what's important to you, what you have done in terms of your accomplishments, the sort of positives that you would bring forth in the relationship oftentimes gets overlooked, devalued, or discredited. And because of the dynamic, and why is it so difficult to leave? Because of oftentimes there is a trauma bond or an element where there had been something negative either said, committed to you, a look, a series of transgressions, which they will not feel sorry for or apologize for, which creates a sort of a lack of closure or a lack of connection. Yet those individuals who are in this sort of imbalance or unstable relationship will find that they will feel more pleasure in the relationship if the other person is happy. So, after the love bombing, they'll learn, not consciously, oftentimes unconsciously, that it's best just to keep the narcissist or the psychopath happy so as to avoid any sort of rage, upset, fight. And then people become very avoidant to embracing the truth or being supportive or feeling supported in their truth. And this creates oftentimes a very difficult situation. So people will then, to get out of that pain, will people please. In other words, it becomes a quick fix, a cheap fix, if you will, to always try to keep others in your environment happy, even though you are suffering or suffering within, in order to regain, positive environment. People will then look and feel that they must be the problem. So then if you can then keep other people happy, well then you get a positive reward, a smile, a sticker, whatever it is that's positive that you have found that has been positive in the relationship. So then you'll overweigh that as valuable or important. So I would say part of the relationship progress in the brainwashing and gaslighting, which means you tend to then reinforce an altered sense of reality of the way it stands with this relationship. In other words, what is really going to transpire. A lot of people thought that they were going to get married to this person. They might have, this other individual might have made false promises or engaged in behaviors that directly counteract the promise or commitment that you have to them, cheating on other people, lying about where they have been, lying about this, that, or the other thing, and not allowing to have any sort of closure or any sort of respect that creates that open and honest communication that's required for relationships to thrive, for relationships to have a fluidity, a back and forth. So they will keep this confusion, and especially that of guilt, which causes people to oftentimes to feel guilty for any sort of positives that they have. So then they want to, they will then abandon themselves or abandon their strength, feel that it is not worth being supportive because they don't have enough votes from another, if you will. So they end up devaluing themselves, throwing themselves then under the bus or remaining under the bus for the relationship to continue. This creates confusion. This creates a people-pleasing behavior, which then simultaneously deprives you of an experience of what is your potential, your power, and instead remaining under others' power or control. And you have to be able to give yourself credit where credit is due, that you can and will deal with and handle this successfully. Just because someone is trying to disorient you, cause you to, think about them all the time, is part of the, I would say, flagship traits of a toxic relationship. With a narcissist or a psychopath, they will do something hurtful to you that requires you then to always sort of think about them all the time. In other words, to pacify them, to keep them from yelling, to keep them from leaving you, to keep them from further triangulating you or spending, they create these sort of energy dynamics which are designed to render you feeling, unhappy, disempowered, unacknowledged, unvalidated, unseen, and unheard. Yet people oftentimes don't realize what has happened, but they experience sort of a death of self or a death of their own ego, their I am. So it's very important to regain this sense of I am. And I am in the positive, and then defining yourself by who you are and what you have versus constantly seeing yourself and depleting yourself for who you aren't and what you're not. There's a then feeling that others must then become someone that they're not in the course of the relationship. They then think that this, is going to be sustainable, but it is not sustainable. So you have to exit the confusion. Be willing to see things clearly. Be willing to not be fearful of where things are at. This is where it is. I am courage enough to look at this in the face. And you do have what it takes. You do have the intelligence. You do have the wherewithal. You do have the audacity to see things clearly. And you do have the audacity to have boundaries and standards for yourself. If those have not been acknowledged and validated by another, then you have no business being around that person and continuing to surround yourself by feelings, continuing to surround yourself by situations, people, events, and experiences that are designed to disempower, oppress, or overpower you. This is not a requirement. This is something that you need to take responsibility and assume responsibility for yourself, namely yourself number one. Oftentimes in narcissist or psychopathic relationships, they will create people, and in their relationship who have like this undying loyalty to them, despite that their needs are not being met. So I would say turn the tides and become loyal to yourself and your wellness rather than being loyal to someone else and then their wellness. Usually there's this always putting other people first and then sort of giving away the farm to them. Look back at this and say, I don't have to do that. I do not, for my own self-esteem, have to over-obligate, over-give in order to be considered okay or feel that I am adequate. This becomes a real problem for people energetically, and they become victims of adrenal fatigue, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and a lack of energy, a lack of hope. So don't fall for this. You are important. You are number one. You are right on. You have seen what you've seen. You've heard what you've heard. You know what you know. Write these things down. You are, so many things occur within the day that oftentimes it becomes, if you're not really sure on yourself and you've lacking confidence because of this relationship, the, maladaptive treatment that you have undergone, oftentimes can make it difficult to validate your own feelings and thoughts. So they will just sort of, flicker in and flicker out. But then if you do not support yourself, if you don't assume responsibility for yourself and then protect yourself, then who is in this situation? You have to come to yourself and find sort of that leader within, that really just your I am within, and allow this to be very simple, very sensible, and very pragmatic. I am. And this is what makes me happy. And I'm going to redirect that energy when I find that bad habit of conceding to another, giving in to another, being pushed over by another. I will, I will remain strong. I will remain silent, and I'll check in within, and I will say, no, I'm going to remain with a backbone, with my head held high. Even if you don't have to communicate, just owning your truth will be enough to help make it through that troubled time. That is known as having faith, and known as having positive self-belief. Having faith is the ability to believe in something even though you don't see the results as of yet. So it's something you have to really go by blind faith and invisible courage. You have to give yourself that credibility. You have to give yourself permission. And whatever that requires, you have to engage in that behavior, whether it's facing your fears, raising your boundaries, raising your standards, knowing what those are, and being able to expand those and being able to manage those on the daily so that you're not injured. You're not facing all sorts of unnecessary negative consequences as a result of being in a relationship. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, here today. I hope these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussions, and support. Have a beautiful day.